Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Our webinar today will look at how templates can lead to improved cybersecurity policies and procedures, and really take a little bit of a deeper dive into cybersecurity management and look at how that can play a role in improving the security for industrial control systems. We will be using the GoToWebinar application. And so if, as we are going throughout the presentation, at any points you have questions or areas where you'd like to get more information, please use the questions tool and to write your question out. At the end of the webinar, we should have about 15 minutes to go through and answer any questions. My name is Patrick O'Brien, and I'm a safety and cybersecurity engineer at Exida. For those of you who don't know me, my background is in chemical engineering, and so I really started out more on the functional safety and process safety side, doing lots of HAZOPs and traditional risk assessments. And about 3 years ago, I started to transition to looking at both cybersecurity and functional safety and really seeing how those play together. And so one of the cool projects that I got to be a part of was writing our cybersecurity book implementing IEC 62443, a pragmatic approach. Um, Another update is that I'm now located in our Boston region office, which is about a 4-hour drive from our US headquarters in Philadelphia area. Just a real brief background on Exida before we jump into the content of our webinar. Exida is really, it prides ourselves on being a customer-focused company where we work with our customers to achieve safe, reliable, and secure solutions. We were originally founded 20 years ago as a certification and assessment group to provide certification to the functional safety IEC 61508 standards. And over time, we've really grown into having 3 main divisions and looking at cybersecurity, machine safety, automotive safety, and a number of other things in addition to functional safety. Today, what I'll be speaking about is really more of our lifecycle services, where we work with customers to solve their functional safety, alarm management, and cybersecurity needs. But we will also talk a little bit about how having the right tools can be an important part to define in our cybersecurity management systems. The last note that I want to touch on before going into the content of today's webinar is a quick update on the Zerologon vulnerability for the Windows Server. And so this was a vulnerability that was first discovered back in August, but this last weekend some additional details were released on it, and it became clear that multiple proof of concepts have been released kind of at large, and it looks like something that is going to very quickly be exploited and used by attackers. And so what this vulnerability does is it allows attackers that once they get onto the local area network, they actually have the ability to manually elevate their privileges to get administrator credentials for domain controllers on basically any Windows Server 2008 or later. And so if you're familiar with the NotPetya attack, it basically was comprised of 2 parts: Eternal Blue, which was how attackers were able to get onto unpatched systems, and then Mimikatz, which would actually steal passwords from those systems to kind of lead to access of other systems. The Zerologon vulnerability is similar to that Mimikatz portion in that it allows them to really expand their footprint once they are onto the network. And the difference is that they don't actually have to run any tool to do it. They can do it just by setting kind of specific information to the servers. And so because of that, it has the highest possible criticality ranking for the vulnerability score of 10. So if you do have any systems running Windows Server, this is definitely something to check and make sure that it is patched as soon as possible. The Department of Homeland Security actually sent out an update on Monday that it wanted all government facilities to have this patched by the end of the day Monday. So this is something really to keep an eye on, and just make sure that if you do have any of these servers that they are patched in a timely manner. And it's certainly something to look at, first on the IT side. For the OT equipment, you do always want to check with your equipment supplier to make sure that the Windows patches have been tested and approved for your system. And so for the OT side, we would definitely recommend communicating with your equipment supplier to make sure that there is a patch available. And so getting back to really our main topic for the day, we'll be looking at cybersecurity management systems and considering three different parts. The first will be, what are the trends that we're currently seeing in terms of cybersecurity adoption, and what does that tell us about the need for cybersecurity management? Next, we'll look at the cybersecurity management system and think about what are the best practices and how can this help to steer some of those trends and address some of the maybe current shortcomings that we're seeing. And then lastly, we'll think about what are the benefits of using templates, and what can these do to really improve our deployment of cybersecurity. So if we start by looking at the observed trends, we can see that there are a variety of forces, a variety of stakeholders that are really driving facility risk management, and in addition to that, cybersecurity adoption as a whole. And so if we think about, first we could start with national standards and regulations. And so for specific regions, for specific industries, there are explicit regulations that are created by the government that really set requirements for cybersecurity that need to be obeyed from a regulatory standpoint. We can also think about insurance requirements and how cybersecurity insurance is now something that is continuing to be a growing field, and will really be, for those companies that aren't self-insured, something to keep an eye on. Then we can think about how industry standards, such as the IEC 62443 standards or the NIST cybersecurity framework, are also driving what's seen as best practice and having an impact on cybersecurity risk management. And then the last force would really be look at stakeholder expectations and what does the organization see as the requirements for cybersecurity. And so with all of those forces impacting cybersecurity adoption, we are actually seeing a range of drivers leading to this. And so in a recent survey that exida conducted, we saw that 82% of organizations have now implemented a strategy for cybersecurity adoption, with really the drivers being somewhat split between regulatory requirements, insurance requirements, with the larger group being really the compliance with industry best practice, and organizations seeing that complying with 62443 and other industry standards actually will have a benefit for them in terms of uptime and the reduced cost associated with cybersecurity incidents. And so what we're seeing is, looking at regardless of the drivers, that the overall adoption for cybersecurity is now at 82%. Another question that we asked in the recent survey was, does your organization have a cybersecurity management system? And so we saw that this is a growing number. It's over half now at 57%. But really what's interesting is that we're still seeing a lag between the amount of cybersecurity adoption and the number of organizations with a cybersecurity management program or management system. And so this means that for at least 25% of organizations, they're in the process of adopting cybersecurity, but don't yet have this plan in place. And for those organizations that do have a cybersecurity management plan, there's always a question of, has that been audited, has been looked at to make sure that it does really have all of the key elements that are needed. And so as we move on and kind of look at, why is there a need for a standard, or why are organizations moving to this industry best practice approach for adoption, we can see a couple of really fundamental needs for that. The first is to make sure that we have safer, more secure working environments for people, really to reduce the potential safety impacts, to really make sure that we are saving lives and seeing that improved safety track record. We also can think about the need to protect investments in plants and equipments and to have that ensured continuous operations really from a financial impact to save money. And then lastly, when we think about the regulatory or government impact, we also need best practice to demonstrate our compliance and show that we are meeting those regulatory requirements to avoid fines or negative financial impacts. And so when we think about those needs, we want to think about how can a standard help us get there. The first would be that it does give us a clear documentation of industry best practice. It gives us something to benchmark ourselves against and really have that clear documentation. It allows us to have consistency across organizations and a more clear delineation of roles between the OEMs, integrators, and users, and even EPCs who will be involved on larger greenfield projects, or even sometimes for large migration projects. And so then when we think about, in addition to that consistency, if we have a step-by-step method, we are less likely to miss a key step by following it. And then the last benefit of standards are that if there are common or known mistakes, these can be explicitly addressed with guidance to avoid them, or comments on what typically leads to those mistakes. And so when we look at this step-by-step method, really what we're talking about is the IEC 62443 cybersecurity lifecycle. This addresses the assessment phase, so everything from identifying what our critical assets are to going through and conducting risk assessment, all the way through the implementation phase, looking at applying cybersecurity countermeasures, doing our security level verification, and then actually validating our countermeasures during our FAT and SAT, as well as making sure we're maintaining security through installation. And then lastly, for the maintenance phase, we can look at all of those key cybersecurity activities for really maintaining the integrity of the control system. So whether that is staying patched and making sure that when critical vulnerabilities are identified, that they are patched in a timely manner. We can look at our security monitoring tools, as well as our processes for management of change and making sure that the modification and decommissioning don't have a negative impact on safety. And so what we see is for all phases of the life cycle, we really need to have clear cybersecurity management in place, which drives when the activities are completed, who they are completed by, what sort of competency do they have, as well as what methodology are they being followed. And so really having cybersecurity management is fundamental for each of those stages, for each of those activities. If we think about what leads to effective implementation of cybersecurity management and of the life cycle as a whole, we can look at a couple of key steps. The first step is to look at a gap assessment or benchmark study and really identify where is the current position for cybersecurity, and with a roadmap, identify what is the path forward, what do we need to do to really achieve that cybersecurity. Next, we can look at developing the cybersecurity management system, which is really what we'll focus on in this webinar, and look at how that can improve our security. Once we have the management system in place, it then really comes down to executing the system, completing the network design, implementing sufficient countermeasures, and then installing that at the site. And then we want to make sure that during operations and maintenance that we continue to act with cybersecurity in mind, and we're doing the necessary steps to maintain that security. Some brief information on the gap assessment. We often will conduct gap assessments to the NIST framework and the IEC 62443 standard. And so essentially we will go through the security topics, look at the information for those, as well as the related IEC 62443 references, and take notes on what's currently being done in the system, and documenting whether that is fully compliant or if there are some areas for improvement. And so for those areas of improvement, that's where we will go in and document recommendations. And so recently, over the last 2 months, I did a webinar series that looked in detail at the gap assessment. And so if learning more about that gap assessment is something you're interested, I definitely would recommend checking those out. What we will focus on in this webinar are what are some of those common findings from the gap assessment, and how can a cybersecurity management system help to mitigate those. And so to start, there are definitely positives in terms of cybersecurity adoption. We're seeing many more organizations move towards that approach. We are seeing improved cybersecurity awareness, really a dedication to using trusted suppliers with a track record for the device development, and really working with those key suppliers to try to maintain security over the life cycle. We're also seeing more cybersecurity concepts be adopted, maybe not for the system as a whole, but certainly for individual devices and for pieces of the network. So things such as hardening, whitelisting, and patching are becoming more common and a little bit more structured on the OT side. Some common gaps that we're finding are that there really isn't a structured process for cybersecurity. It really relies on the controls engineers or whoever has that OT responsibility to go through and complete that activity. Next, we could look at the roles and responsibilities aren't clearly defined. We might not have a clear breakdown between what is on the IT side of responsibilities and what's on the OT side, which can lead to sometimes poor communication, even within the organization or between the organization and the equipment suppliers. From a documentation standpoint, this is a case where even though the cybersecurity concepts may be applied, there's not necessarily up-to-date documentation or fully up-to-date asset inventories or procedures that are followed for the activities. And without those procedures, we sometimes see that it can be difficult to reliably repeat those security activities and achieve the same results. We're also seeing that some organizations are conducting more of a vulnerability assessment and having a little bit better of a clear gap of what's being done from a cybersecurity standpoint, but they're not often taking it to a risk-based level where they actually have a risk assessment completed and have a risk-based criteria for addressing cybersecurity concerns. And then lastly, we see that sometimes the cybersecurity requirements are not as clearly and readily defined as maybe they should be. And so when we think about what options do we have for closing these gaps, we have a model that is developed in the IEC 62443 standards of maturity levels. And so for asset owners, the 2-1 standard basically outlines that there are 4 different levels that they could achieve. For the first level, it's initial or ad hoc. And so this means that cybersecurity activities may be completed, but there isn't clear policies and procedures in place in terms of how they are done reliably. To get to the second maturity level, this is now where we are managed. And so we do have those written policies, we have trained personnel, and we start to see that our outcomes are more repeatable. The third maturity level is called defined or practiced. And essentially we have all of the documentation from maturity level 2, and we can actually show that it's been done at least once. Lastly, to get to maturity level 4, in addition to practicing and following the cybersecurity management system, we need to really be monitoring and taking metrics over time, and use that to make evidence-based decisions, and really to continue to improve the system over time. And so probably for a majority of systems that we look at, although they are really doing a better job of implementing the security activities. Because of the lack of documentation, they might be really more of what we see as the initial or ad hoc maturity level. And so what we'll look at are the benefits of going with a cybersecurity management system, and what are some of those best practices for improving the maturity level. And so if we think about how to address the findings from the gap assessment, we can see that the majority of them are really going to be explicitly addressed based on the cybersecurity management system, where we are defining the roles and responsibilities. We are really putting that formal process in place, and documenting the requirements for maintaining documents, and really having them in accessible locations. And then in terms of the repeatability of activities and risk assessment, these are actually addressed by the standards and procedures that would be documents underneath the management system. And so really by having that high-level policy with those standards, we can address a lot of the common gaps from a cybersecurity standpoint. If we think about what are the objectives of the cybersecurity management system, we have a couple of key areas. The first is to really document and continue to improve the company's cybersecurity culture, and make sure that cybersecurity hygiene is something that is looked at as critical, that people are aware of their impact on the security of the control system to really foster a positive environment for security. We can look at security planning and thinking about, for upcoming projects, for migrations, what are the key security activities that need to get done, and how can we do them in an efficient lifecycle based approach? As we talked about, we really want to define the roles and responsibilities for security so that each member of the organization, each team member, knows exactly what they are responsible for. Part of that, clear roles and responsibility are also having the personnel competency requirements documented and tracked and recorded, so we can make sure that we are meeting those requirements over time. Next, we'll look at the need for clear documentation, because this is something that will really be critical for maintaining the security. We also need to have periodic verification and assessment activities, to make sure that we are following our management system and achieving our desired results. And then lastly, we really want to document the activities in processes and procedures so we have that repeatable method. If we think about the types of security documents, we often look at three different layers. The first and broadest scope would be a policy. This is what our high-level cybersecurity management system document is. And it's really the expression of intent of senior management to apply the cybersecurity lifecycle, and it outlines the objectives of what we want to achieve for cybersecurity without going into all of the details of the how. The how is really what we capture in our cybersecurity standards and procedures, where we document our requirements for compliance, as well as the specific methods that we follow to achieve that compliance. If we think about what are the components of a cybersecurity management system, what needs to be included, we can think about the first would be to look at the cybersecurity management system scope, set up a clear definition of what assets and parts of the organization the document applies to. We can define our organizational security approach and whether we are having a coordinated IT and OT team that looks at security overall, or whether we have separate teams for IT and OT security that are coordinating together. We also want to outline our security lifecycle approach and define what subsequent procedures should be followed underneath the CSMS. And so in this procedures, we will capture the 9 security program elements from the 62443 standard, as well as all of the lifecycle steps necessary to achieve security. The next part of an effective cybersecurity management system is clear requirements for staff training and cybersecurity awareness. And this is really where the roles and responsibilities come into play and the personal competency documentation can be outlined. Another key piece is looking at the business continuity plan and thinking about when a cybersecurity incident occurs, what are the actions necessary to respond to the event effectively, to limit the amount of damage done, and also to really have a clear plan in place for how to continue operations and make sure that we can continue to meet our key objectives. The last piece that we want to think about are really the T-Hub audit, or how do we document and ensure compliance to the cybersecurity management system. And so that's where periodic audits or cybersecurity assessments are really effective for getting that data, and they give us the opportunity to review, improve, and really make sure that our CSMS is staying current over time. And that gets us into more of that continuous improvement approach. When we look at best practices for roles and responsibilities, really we want to make sure that we have clear delineation and communication. Each phase of the life cycle should have, one accountable and one responsible personnel who really are going to be the drivers for that activity, and are accountable to make sure that that activity is completed. And from there, we may have other roles that are consulted or informed depending on the activity that's completed. And so really when we think about cybersecurity management, having these roles and responsibilities are one of those specifically noted objectives. And so this is a screenshot from our cybersecurity plan template, where we really do have that RACI chart defined for the full life cycle. And it's an Excel template that can be fully customized to look at the specific roles within the organization, and really document who has the responsibility for the different security steps. The last best practice for the cybersecurity management system is really to look at the documentation objectives. And so when we think about what needs to be documented, it's really any information that's needed to effectively perform each phase of the security lifecycle. So from assessment through implementation and operations and maintenance, anything that's required to manage our cybersecurity. So having our up-to-date asset inventory, having documentation from the equipment suppliers, having the results from our verification and validation activity. So having our security level verification, having the results of our countermeasure validation at the site acceptance test really is critical for having that proof of the regulatory compliance, of the adherence to industry best practice. And then also really what's necessary to perform our cybersecurity assessments or our periodic checks to make sure that the life cycle is being followed. And so when we're looking at what makes documentation effective or complete, it comes down to what we call the 4 R's. And that means having the right data in the right format at the right time and in the right place. And so if we follow that, if we have the right information documented, if we have it in searchable formats or easy to find locations, we can make sure that when we're doing these validation activities, that we have it really at our fingertips, and are able to go through and really complete it effectively. And so now if we think about what can templates do really to support the process of developing the cybersecurity management. And so we can think about how we can use templates to really integrate our cybersecurity management with existing risk management systems. And so for organizations with a functional safety management plan, we really have baked that coordination into our cybersecurity templates. And there are certain points where we would even reference the functional safety management plan. And so having that clear visibility across the procedures is really important for really integrating the lifecycle activities. It can be easier to get management buy-in for the implementation, as well as emphasizing all of those elements that we looked at of competency, awareness, and training to really make sure that we are focusing on personnel security. Um, it gives us a great starting point for that documentation. We're already, say, 80% of the way there to what we need for our site-specific standards and procedures. And it, inherently gives us the ability to leverage templates that we, are putting into place, and also has key references to tools that can support us on our cybersecurity lifecycle, whether they are the Excellentia Cyber tool for conducting cybersecurity risk assessment, or we want to define what types of vulnerability scans or network monitoring that we can look at. Having the right documents in place can really make it easier for us to complete tasks by leveraging tools and templates. If we think about, well, what templates are there that can be used to jumpstart the cybersecurity management system, we can look at them for a number of different categories. First, from a cybersecurity management system, we have a set of templates that really look at the management system as a whole, our security plan, and issues of personnel competency. And then we have specific standards and lifecycle procedures for each of our phases, from analysis through design, all the way through operation and maintenance. And so on the cybersecurity management side, we have recently released 6 templates that walk all the way through the cybersecurity management system high-level document, through our project security plan. We have a procedure for evaluating personnel competency, as well as some templates for documenting that in a competency log and in an action item template. We also have the cybersecurity assessment procedure, which really documents the 5 different stages where you will go in and validate that the cybersecurity lifecycle activities are being completed effectively. And so this is the current cybersecurity management package. We also have a number of templates for the analysis phase that look at key steps in the cybersecurity lifecycle. And so we have templates to do the high-level risk assessment, which is really the initial risk assessment that would be done to support the zone and conduit. We have procedures for conducting cybersecurity vulnerability assessment. So what are the key areas to look at during a vulnerability analysis? We also have the detailed risk assessment procedure that looks at more of a HAZOP or cyber PHA-based approach to the risk assessment, and allows us to look at our countermeasures and consider threat likelihood. And then at the end of the analysis phase, we have templates for documenting all of the key cybersecurity requirement information to specify to vendors and integrators, really what needs to be met for the system. For the design and implementation phase, we have all of the templates really to walk us through that design process, through the definition of our user security and access control requirements, to looking at the security level verification activity, and making sure that from a either qualitative or semi-quantitative standpoint that we have fully mitigated the cybersecurity risk. We also have information for the installation process and considerations for the cyber factory acceptance testing activities, as well as maintaining security through installation, and then lastly, the cyber site acceptance test activities. Through the operations and maintenance side, we have templates that cover patch management activities, the process of going and creating ICS backups, as well as emergency response and business continuity to look at really having an effective response when a cybersecurity incident does occur. And so we think about, what are the benefits of using the cybersecurity management system templates, there are a couple of key ways that they are able to help us. The first is that they give us a starting point for cybersecurity management and can really cut down the development time as well as the energy significantly to implement. And so we have, if we think about putting in this whole policy and procedures into place, this is something that, it wouldn't be uncommon for an asset owner really to have it take, a full year or even a number of years to um, get all of these policies developed, to get them in place, and to actually start rolling them out. What we've seen with the templates is really with a core team and having the templates as a starting point, this can cut down that time drastically, and it may be closer to a quarter to actually get the procedures developed, and then we can look at phasing in the implementation once the procedures are written and in place. And so that really comes down to increasing the speed of the deployment of cybersecurity activities and cybersecurity tasks. We also are able to ensure that all of the relevant requirements of IEC 62443 are captured because the templates were developed based on that and really have all of the compliance checks built into the templates. But more than just being kind of a regurgitation or replication of the standard, the templates also include industry best practice and really look at a pragmatic approach for meeting the intent of the standard. The templates have also been developed to be easy to use, and so we have each of these highlighted areas are actually fields in the templates that can be modified once and really then will update everywhere in the document. And we do have instructions that go out with the templates on how to complete that activity. And so by having these documents easy to use and in a consistent format, we then make it as easy as possible to have consistent and uniform procedures for cybersecurity. And so, the template is made so that it can be easily converted to any organization's specific document templates and specific document schemes. And so what we see in terms of outcomes of implementing a cybersecurity management system this way are that we can have improved communications with vendors regarding the cybersecurity requirements. We have repeatable and now continually improving cybersecurity practices. We can move to a risk-based approach for managing cybersecurity, which gives us better visibility and an easier comparison between our safety and cybersecurity activity, so we can really move to more of an integrated approach. Um, we can also see that the time required to complete cybersecurity tasks is diminished because we have a formally defined process that we can follow each time, and we can really make sure that we aren't going to have to backpack and do rework because we say weren't doing the full activity the first time. And then the last thing that we can look at that's really critical for some organizations is the ability to deploy the approach globally. And so if we think about it, we can make the management system, the perfect fit for the organization. If it's a single site, we can tailor it to that site. Or if we're looking at a multi-site, multinational organization, we really have the ability in the cybersecurity management system to apply it to all of the sites. And then the individual sites and the procedures can really document their specific concerns and really have that clear communication between the site procedures and the overall cybersecurity management policy that would be for the organization. And so what we see is the maturity level, having that management system really gives you the roadmap to increase maturity level. And so just by having that CSMS created and documented, that's really what's necessary in addition to training to get that maturity level 2 designation to reach that next maturity level. Then from there, actually using the CSMS and applying it for the site is what's required to reach a maturity level 3. And then if we think about tracking our ongoing data and continually improving the CSMS, that would be the next step to achieve a maturity level 4 for cybersecurity. And so if we look at, back and summarize the presentation, we covered the current trends that we are seeing for cybersecurity adoption. We looked at how can a cybersecurity management system be used to address common gaps. And then we looked at how templates can benefit this approach and make implementation easier. And so I did see a couple questions come in throughout the presentation. We're just going to go through the outro slides real quick. And so if you do have any other questions, now is a good time to enter them into the chat, and we will review those shortly. What we do have here are our upcoming courses for the exida Academy. And so we have a number of online courses, both live and as well as a number of self-paced courses that can be taken. Two ones that I want to highlight that are coming up at the end of October and early November are our CS 101 course, which is our introduction to the cybersecurity lifecycle, and then our 2-day CS 102 course, which does a little bit more of a deeper dive into the lifecycle and looks at the aspects of cybersecurity management as well as all of the lifecycle activities. So I will actually be the instructor for those upcoming courses. And so if you find the webinar topics interesting, but want to learn more, this is really a great opportunity to do that. And we do have a number of other great courses on the safety and security side as well that are coming up. The last thing on the training side to note is that we do also have a lot of online self-paced trainings that you can take fully on your own schedule. And so again, the CS 102 course is available in that format as well. If you do want to get updates from exida on upcoming webinars or web symposiums, I definitely recommend following us on different social media or signing up for the exida newsletter. And so now to look at these questions, let's go through. Okay. So, are there any recommendations to include cybersecurity risks and mitigation as part of a CHASOP or HAZOP? So yes, so certainly we do recommend taking an integrated approach of safety and security. And so one approach is to really conduct the HAZOP first and then take the outputs, so the hazard scenarios, and use that as a key input for the detailed cybersecurity risk assessment. So we've seen that be effective. We've also seen the pairing of CHASOP and high-level risk assessment to be a really efficient way of looking at reliability, safety, and security concerns together. And we do have a webinar that I did specifically on that, on how CHASOP and HLRA can be integrated. So I would recommend checking that out for more information. So would a CHASOP for cybersecurity be included as part of the assessment template? So we do have a CHASOP template in our functional safety template set that can be purchased to be used with these templates. The cybersecurity risk assessment templates look at more of a HAZOP-based approach. So you would see kind of a detailed cyber risk assessment methodology there. So this question is, when you say the templates are released, do you mean that they are available to anyone, or are they part of services you provide? And so for the release designation for the templates, what that means is they can be purchased for a cost on the exida website as products. And so if you are interested in the templates, there are kind of two routes to go. You could purchase the template bundle that you're interested in from the website, and you would just get the documents in Word or Excel and be able to edit them and make changes yourself. Or what we also do is we can do bundles of um, templates and services where we would provide you the templates and then work with you to update them. And so we've certainly seen customers take both approaches on the safety side, and I've worked with a number of customers directly on the cyber side to do this. Okay, so this next question is, what is the estimated percent in savings per each industrial cybersecurity maturity level? And then also, what is the percent in savings for using the templates? So what we have looked at in terms of estimating the percent in savings as we go up, and really the maturity model that we've used to kind of benchmark this is the integrated process risk maturity model, where we look at the cyber maturity as well as the safety and alarm management maturity. But what we've seen is that really going from maturity level um, 0, where there's nothing in place, to getting to more of that practiced approach can have a very significant reduction in cost um, in a couple of places. The first is that we see a big reduction in unexpected downtime because we are kind of capturing maintenance issues before um, they lead to a shutdown, and we're also preventing cybersecurity issues before they lead to a shutdown. We're also seeing less reactive maintenance. So those would be the reductions in cost. And we would see that as we increase maturity levels, we have a slight increase in the proactive maintenance. In terms of the exact percent of savings, um, it really comes down to the specific industry and the specific plant, because it can be impacted based on really the cost of unplanned downtime. But we do have some general figures that we can share. And if you are interested in learning a little bit more about what we do for the maturity level approach, definitely shoot me an email and we can do a little bit more of a tailored presentation just to walk through some of that data that we have. In terms of the savings for using the templates, again, it'll depend a little bit from the organization based on the amount of, kind of the cost of labor in the organization. But what we would say is that typically having the templates as a starting point will reduce the amount of time taken to, develop the procedures if we were, say, starting from scratch by probably at least 50% on a very conservative estimate, to maybe up to maybe a 75% reduction in cost on a little bit of the higher end, because there will still be time to review and customize the documents, but it's much quicker than having to start from scratch. And so depending on the availability of the engineering team to do the templates, that can really have a significant financial benefit to have those templates as a starting point. Um, All right, so thank you very much for the questions. Those are the questions that I am currently showing. What I will do now very quickly is just pull up our template for the cybersecurity management system and do just a little bit of a demo of the included information. Okay, so I'm now sharing a look at the cybersecurity management system template. As we can see, these highlighted areas are our fields, so if we modify them once, we can update them throughout the entire document. We have some instructions that go with on how to use the templates, as well as a management summary. What we've done is wherever we reference other templates, we have them highlighted in blue to make them stand out. And as organizations are going through and updating, they can customize this based on their updated naming conventions for the templates. And so we really go all the way through general cybersecurity management activities, such as physical and personnel security. We'll look at network security, device security, all the way through. And then for the end of the document, we actually look at each of the lifecycle steps and provide references to the key standards, as well as some general information on how the activity is completed. And so this is just to really show the amount of information that would be included in the CSMS template itself. All right, so going back, if you do have any other questions or would like to see a little bit more of an in-depth demo on the templates, please don't hesitate to send me an email. This webinar will be posted on YouTube, so if you do want to go back and listen, it will be available for that. All right, thank you very much for your time, and please enjoy the rest of your day.